Why would I marry? I'm not made to be any man's chattel. I have my work, which I love. I have my home. It is not much, I grant, yet sufficient for my shelter. But more than these, I have something very few women can claim, my freedom.
Welcome to the Busy Girls Book Club. We are a podcast bringing you all the news and updates and reviews and opinions you really want and really need to decide if you're going to read the internet's favorite books or not. So yeah, all those books you see all over TikTok, we're giving you the real honest opinions you need to know on whether if it's spending your valuable time on. I'm Casey.
I'm Caitlin.
And I'm Catherine. And this week, I convinced these two to read a book that was my top book of 2024. So that spoils my star rating for sure. Year of Wonders by Geraldine Brooks. And Geraldine Brooks has been super popular in recent years for her book Horse. And she's very well known, like wins a lot of awards. And yeah, she writes a lot of historical fiction books. That's kind of what she is known for. And this one, Year of Wonders, covers 1600s, I believe, England. And it's a small town that gets infected with the bubonic plague. And it follows one woman's experience in this very small town that then becomes sequestered for a year to drive out the plague or live through the plague without spreading it further. And it kind of lives with these moral dilemmas that she's having, also spiritual, faith-based dilemmas. And as she loses people and grieves, and the town forever changes because of the death and destruction and kind of the death of society for them. So a really pick-me-up book.
It does have a hopeful ending, so
Yes.
But lots of people
Spoiler.
die.
No, I'm just kidding.
Which is not a spoiler because it's the plague.
Can we talk about middle school? Caitlin loved learning about the plague, and my social studies teacher in 6th or 7th grade, we played a game where everyone was like a person living in the time period, and every time we'd come to class, you'd draw cards, and it was basically like the Oregon Trail. So we'd wear signs around our necks that were dead from the plague. It was so funny. It's like that episode of Parks and Rec. I don't know if
I will say we did also play the Oregon Trail game, and still to this day I'm incredibly proud that I was the only person from my group to survive. So
I for sure died of the plague in feudal England. So
yeah, well, despite the fact that I'm type 1 diabetic and my vision, I cannot even see the big E on a vision chart. So
let's be honest, you would not survive.
Yeah, I would have been dead by 12 probably. But you know, we can dream. Anyway, reviews first. Do you guys have your reviews?
I have a very funny review, but it took a very long time to find it because these 1-star reviews, people decided to write essays on how much they hated this book and how much they DNF'd this book. And I'm like, you're spending way too much mental headspace and free time reviewing this book. Anyway, This one I found very funny, and it's 1 star, and it says, "Ladies, don't screw your rectors."
Yep, I saw that one. That was my favorite review because it was one of the only funny ones. But I have another one, so don't you worry.
Okay, good.
Well, do you want to go then?
Sure, I'll go. Of course, it's another 1-star review. I found this one funny just because it was truly ridiculous. And so 1 star, abandoned early on due to vulgar sexual references. What?
Oh my God. Like what?
If you guys haven't read the book, this book is Puritan. There's the main character is a very proper, old school woman who is trying to do the right Christian thing. And so I am truly my mind boggled about what she's even implicating here.
Yeah, this is a Puritan ideology book. They're Puritans, literally.
But one reader abandoned early because of crude sexual references. So
yeah, the dirty stuff's not even until the end.
Yeah.
Well, okay. I have a 5-star review for you. It says, "This was so good. The moral of this book is that history always repeats itself, unfortunately. I couldn't believe that this was first published in 2001. Let me just say, reading this in a post-COVID world is
Crazy.
wild.
Oh, yep.
Because the parallels are
wild.
crazy.
Yeah.
Like predicting the future much?
Yeah. It felt actually eerie reading it.
Oh, yeah.
Because of all the things that were the same, like the whole quarantine and only have a small group of people around you. I mean, it was like, it totally changed the reading experience.
I am finally at the point, though, where I can read a book like this and not have, like, a visceral reaction.
Yes.
Yeah, it took a minute.
Yeah. Tough shit. Okay. Well, now for y'all's opinions, where did everybody else come down?
I mean, I gave it a 5-star. I think that was kind of obvious when I said it was my top book of 2024.
Yeah.
So I thoroughly enjoyed the book. How much you can enjoy a book about the plague. But the writing was beautiful. The story itself, I found extremely thought-provoking and compelling. And yeah.
I'll go next because I also gave it 5 stars. While it's not, like, probably going to be my favorite book of the whole year, I can't find much fault with it. The writing was really good. I enjoyed the story, and it was, like, short enough that I was engaged, and I enjoyed the historical fiction aspect. So, like, I really just don't have enough wrong with it to rate it any lower, which bring on the lower rating.
Yeah, cue me. I liked one of you guys' fantasy novels, so obviously I had to come back next week and do better. So this one,
But a historical fiction, like,
Yeah,
come on,
we
it's, like,
gave this to
borderline
you.
lit fic.
yeah, they tried to serve me literature thinking I'd like it, and I spat it back out. I give this book 2 stars. I'll
Okay,
say
I didn't know
though,
it was that bad. Catherine said she saw your review.
yeah,
Oh, Lord.
I do think there's a couple of things though that like contextualize it. A historical fiction is just truly not my genre. Um, I just think I have a really high bar for when I enjoy them, and it just didn't hit it for me. Um, I didn't think the book was bad. I just genuinely was bored. I just didn't really care about the characters. I didn't feel emotionally invested in them, and I like just found it sort of like what you would expect, which I don't think in every book is a bad thing, but for me, this book just didn't really capture my imagination. Um, the other thing is just that I think I had expectations that are not really the book's fault, but it
Or
just
Catherine's fault.
happened.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
No, so my expectations were not about quality, actually. It was more so that, like, the book being titled, like, The Year of Wonders, which they do introduce you to and you understand why. But I think I just anticipated the book would be a little bit more magical and, like, blurring the lines between reality
See, I
and
thought the title was perfect.
I think after I read it, I understood why it was called that. But going in, I expected a book that was a little bit different. And so it's very like almost like hardcore realism. And I expected a book that was a little bit more blurred lines between, the spirituality of the time and the plague and religion and what was really happening and miracles and everything. I just thought it would be a little bit more like mystical and mysterious.
Yeah, for once, Catherine and I served you up a book that had nothing to do with magic. So good job.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's just, I don't know, there's nothing wrong with doing hardcore realism. I just didn't like it as much as like the idea I had in my head. And I don't think that's anyone's fault. I just think it just happened. And so, but then it's hard to.
Granted, yes, the title can be misleading if you go in thinking fantasy or thinking magical realism. And it is so not that. It is literally day-to-day life in a plague.
Yeah. And so honestly, this book just like, it really just wasn't for me. I don't have like that many things that I explicitly hated about it, other than I just like couldn't really get into it.
Fair.
Well, people agreed with Caitlin and I a lot more because this has 4. I know, seriously. We got the popular crowd. Anyway, you're the
We
outcast.
are the sheep.
We are the sheep. Anyway, Goodreads gave it 4 stars and Amazon gave it 4.4 stars, which is pretty high for a book that was published in 2001 and continues to rack up reviews since. Let's get into our regular discussion questions. Is this book more plot or character driven?
So I feel like you would think plot. However, the plot sets it up and the character steers the book. I think our main character, the book is so much about her and her decisions that I think it is character driven.
I agree that it's character. The plague itself is obviously out of the character's control, but most of the book is focused on the main character. And it's more so about, I feel, her development and her seeing the people around her change over time. And as the plague kind of exerts this like very hard existential pressure on everyone. So I do feel like it's more about the characters and how they change.
100% agree. The plague is the inciting incident. And then from there, the character is the main driver of the story as this kind of spreads throughout. It's more of like a societal story. So the society is the driver of it and how herd mentality can really fuck up a town.
Again, COVID flashbacks for real.
Seriously. No, like it's legitimately impressive how she wrote this before COVID happened. So she obviously did her research on the plague and how people reacted to plagues.
Yeah, thank God for running water in our pandemic era.
Yeah. Yeah.
Have you or would you read other books by the author? And this is where I'd like to share. I was supposed to go to Geraldine Brooks was in Kansas City for an author event, and I had tickets, and it was going to be over her new memoir with a signed copy of the book. She had to get an emergency appendectomy, so it didn't happen. I still got the signed book and got to pick it up, but I was like really excited to be reading this while I went to hear her talk and was kind of bummed, but I do think I would read another book by her.
I have not read any other books by her, but this is where I shout out my mother, Stacy. She has been literally begging me to read Horse by Geraldine Brooks. My mom has read both Year of Wonders and Horse. She preferred Year of Wonders, but she really, really wants me to read Horse. They were both 5 stars for her. She loves Geraldine Brooks, and she just wants someone to talk about this author with. And she was so happy when I finished Year of Wonders and we could chat about it for 30 minutes. And she was just like, well, now you have to read Horse because I need another person to chat about this. Granted, she read Horse for book club, so she had a bunch of ladies to chat with about the book. So
didn't you say she came to their book club?
I think so. It could have been a different author, though. They get a lot of authors in their book club. My mom is bougie famous when it comes to books.
I aspire.
Yeah. Hopefully us one day.
Just get a lot of friends that are really in touch with the art scene and then glom on. That's what my mother has done.
Yeah, cueing my middle-aged art lady. I need to go buy a chunky necklace. I'm not against reading another book by her, even though I didn't particularly enjoy this one. I have heard a lot about Horse, and I didn't think that she was a bad author. Again, this book just like wasn't it for me, but I would be open-minded to reading a different book by her.
I will say she won her Pulitzer for her novel March.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe that'll be my next one. I don't know.
Yeah. Okay. What about the pacing of the book? I will be honest. This was one of the major killers for me. It is just like, oh no, they're sickened. They'll be dead in a few days. Oh, they're dead now. Like, I was like, girl, come on, please.
I mean, yes, the pacing of the book is slow and you don't expect it for how short this book is. It takes a while to read. Like I read it in 5 days, and I think that's fast for this book.
Yes, I think it took me 6. And I don't think I would have read it as fast if I wasn't trying to finish it for the podcast. Also, I did get sick, so that also slowed me down.
Oh no, Casey has the plague.
You know,
She
thankfully
got
I'm not.
sick from reading this book.
Yeah, I did. This book infected me.
It actually took me a little over a week, so it took me the longest, I guess. But I didn't mind the pacing. I also think the slow pacing was actually like purposeful for the story, and I think it was correct for the book.
See, yeah, this book reminded me, and it's no surprise because same time period, of Shakespeare. You have to get over a reading curve in order to enjoy it because it's in old-ish English. And yeah, it definitely takes on the type of like Shakespearean English. And so they definitely like to talk about their day-to-day lives.
Yeah.
But once you get into it, I found the pacing very good. It just took like a good 100 pages to truly get into the book.
Yeah. This book was just hard work to me. I was like, here we go. But would you watch a movie or TV show of the book?
You know, honestly, I would. A movie? I think this would be a great movie,
I think
honestly.
it could be a kind of wild movie.
Like this could be an
Just
Oscar
how
winner.
the loop it throws you at the end, I think it could be kind of crazy.
I do. I could see it being a good movie. I could also see it being a good like special limited series TV show. I'm not opposed. I'd watch it.
I can just imagine like an Oscar-winning actress playing this character, Anna, and then winning the Oscar for Anna.
Yes.
Who would you
Yes.
cast?
I don't know.
And
They have to be the right. It's a little old, unfortunately.
Old. This girl's like what, 18, 20?
Oh, that's
19,
true. I
yeah.
forget that she's so young.
Florence Pugh.
Dakota
Ooh.
Fanning.
Who's that girl who just won the Oscar for Anora?
Oh my gosh, Mikey Madison.
Mikey Madison,
I'm obsessed with her.
I love her.
I feel like she has to play like crazier characters though. It's like Anna's a little bit Puritan, I think, for Mikey, but I'd still watch it. She's a great actress.
Well, we talked about pacing, but what is your busy girl rating?
Okay, I will knock it down to a 4 for busy girl rating because I do think that it's worth reading this book. And I think if you're into historical fiction, this is a very well written book and a very interesting topic. And I think it's the right amount in length. I don't think there's too much or not enough. I think it's kind of like the perfectly written book on this topic.
I agree with most of what you said. However, I'm going to drop mine to a 3 because I just think anyone who's reading this book is going to make it through it. It's not for everybody. If you're like a Jane Austen fan, but like a little bit more morbid and a little less romance, then sure. But it's like pretty, not dull, but like also it's a lot of just like, and then I scrubbed the hearth, and then I, like
that's the.
I didn't mind that, but I don't think everyone would like it.
The day-to-day activities of plague life, which felt very similar to the day-to-day activities of COVID lockdown.
Yeah, just was drinking.
Yes.
I am gonna stick with it too. I think this book is hard work. I'll be honest. I don't think it's a good book for like when you're busy to just pick up and put down. You pick it up, people are dying. You put it down, people are dying. The horses are being rerouted through the village, and then you pick it up again, and we're sweeping the stone floor. I'm just like, ah. I'm gonna stick with it too.
Okay.
Okay, well, hopefully this discussion is more lively than Casey's description of the book.
I will say, okay, I'm not a total hater. There were very sophisticated themes in the book, and there is a lot about groupthink. Like, I think this book is still like worth a book club discussion.
This is a perfect book club book. Let's be real.
Yeah.
Okay, should we get into the spoiler section? Even though everyone knows what happens in the plague, everyone dies.
Yeah. Let's get into it. Spoiler alert. In case you haven't finished this book, stop here and then come back and listen to the rest of this episode as we kind of dive into Anna's aftermath in the year of plague.
Everyone dies.
Everyone dies. I was
Except
actually
her.
interested. Yeah, I was very interested to see if the author would kill her off. I thought that could even be the ending.
Well, at one point she writes like, because it's written from her point of
Right.
view.
It's written
and she's
in,
like, and if I had succumbed, I would not
hindsight.
be writing this. And I was like, okay, so she lives.
Right.
Would have been interesting though.
Yes.
Very Dear Diary-esque.
Yes. Extremely Dear Diary-esque.
Did you like that writing style?
We've mentioned this before. It was hard for me to get into. It was, I mean, and I respect what she's doing because it's very like authentic, like how people spoke at the time, more Old Englishy. But the whole like sort of written cadence, I thought hurt is part of what hurt the pacing. Because it does feel like you're reading a diary. It doesn't feel like someone's like talking to you, at least for me. So yeah, that was something I struggled with in this book.
I will say, had it not been for her teasing the death of Eleanor in the beginning, I'm not sure how well paced this writing style would have been for me, but I was reading to find out like what that opening chapter really meant.
Yeah.
So that was smart. I didn't mind it because of that. I was really interested in Anna and her thought processes and think she was learning about herself and the world. So I didn't mind that.
Yeah, I really, to be fair, it took me an hour to finish 20 pages of this book. So
For Catherine, who's a speed reader.
yeah, no, those first 20 pages, to be fair, I also was reading them at the DMV, so probably not the best place to be reading a book.
That's your whole problem.
Yeah.
I know, seriously. But I was having trouble retaining the information and like really getting into it because of the writing style. But I think it needed to be written this way if you're going to write about old England in the 1600s and you're going to be writing as if it's a Dear Diary entry from this character. I also agree, like, normally I don't like time jumps at all. I appreciated these time jumps and I actually look forward to both perspectives. Like, I wasn't like hankering for the next perspective or the next time jump. I really appreciated what the author was doing with how Anna was looking back on her year of plague and looking back on all she's lost and really like thinking and critically thinking about the society she was living in and the standards she was putting upon herself and others, and how the church was teaching them very different things from what she was seeing in eye to eye with other people. And yeah, I agree. Like, if we didn't know that Eleanor was going to die, probably would have dragged a lot longer because I was really looking forward to that moment where we learned why and how she died and like kind of more of her secrets, because she seemed like a very like perfect woman, but you could tell that that's just a facade. So you really wanted to know more about Eleanor, and Anna was kind of like the gateway into that life.
We've already mentioned the sort of time jumps, but you know, she got married very young. She had children. Her husband dies in a mining accident. And then the plague happens. But the story is told from her perspective, like in the future. So after the plague is over, she's telling this story. What did you guys think of Anna?
I liked Anna because she started definitely as one person and it is a totally different person in a very reasonable way. Her story was very reflective, and you can see how when someone's foundation shifts, it can look like they've like radicalized, but like in reality, they've just like learned new things. And it was very interesting to watch her undergo that transformation. And I liked her voice. Like I was never bored with her and what she was thinking because I feel like it was a very like believable thought process in the questions she was asking and the reflections she was making.
I also love that she was kind of exploring her own sexuality and how that was really frowned upon in that time period. I mean, she got married at like what, 14, 15, and then had
Yeah.
kids at like 16, 17, 18. And you could obviously tell she was a very loving mother and she loved her kids and she liked her husband. Like he was a good man and that's about as much as she could ask for at that point. And she recognizes that she was very fortunate compared to most of her friends. And I think she had a lot of good reflections and like she knew herself pretty well despite really not knowing or allowing herself to get outside of like societal standards. She knew what she was put in and the society around her. But it's really interesting when the plague hits and then she really starts critiquing how things are done and says like, this doesn't seem right considering y'all are like putting this woman in the river and stoning her and killing them for no fucking reason. Like y'all are just closed-minded. And like she started to open herself up to the idea that society's wrong. I'm in the right, actually. And I'm okay to be a sexual being. And I can be a woman in power without a man telling me what to do.
Well, she was interesting because she was really the first person in the town to lose everything and had to exist beyond that. So that was her perspective became interesting because of that, because she's just kind of like, what do I have to lose? I can say whatever I want and do whatever I want now.
Right. I feel like my commentary is just going to be a little repetitive. I just found her kind of boring. I was like, yep, this is a normal girl living a normal life at this time period. I thought,
come on.
At the beginning, yes.
Yes, at the beginning. But that's the point is you get to learn about the thoughts of a puritanical woman who has been completely brainwashed into what men want her to be. Like, that's cool how she changed throughout the book.
I mean, I thought it was fine. I just didn't think it was like that crazy or anything. And the ending, I'll be honest, I struggle with. I just cat appearance. Anyway, I struggle with the whole like going to the Middle East and like totally reinventing herself. I was like, I don't know. I don't know that you go straight from being like a Puritan girl, like well-behaved Puritan girl who's like just survived the plague to like just getting off a boat in the Middle East with your child when you're pregnant. I was like, I don't know.
Well, to be fair, it was
I
foreshadowed.
think that's where it dives into like litfic.
Yeah. It dives into litfic, and also it was foreshadowed like her talking about the doctors in the Middle East and like their theories on medicine are very different from England, and it's more actually better for you than whatever England was doing with leeches and bullshit like that. And then also she needed to escape England. She couldn't stay in England anymore. So she just kind of hopped on a boat and then got off at a place.
Yeah, I honestly just don't think I was super invested in her as a character. And that's just sort of like, that's my problem with the whole book, is I just didn't feel that invested. So
I guess that's fair. As long as you can like recognize like the themes are cool.
Yes, I'll say the themes are cool, Catherine.
I'm like trying here. Like this book like made me rethink a lot of things, and I felt like it was like a feminist icon, and like, yeah.
So as what I like to call a recovering Baptist, who still like is part of the church but doesn't always agree with like the stuff going on, I found this super interesting. Like there were a lot of parallels to what I've experienced, and so I was a big fan as my cat sticks her face in the camera.
I
I
will say
mean,
too,
recovering Catholic here too. So
right.
But like
Recovering
I'm still
Presbyterian.
engaged with the church,
that's fair.
Right.
which I feel like is kind of unique. And like she didn't totally like, I don't know, she still believes something. She just wasn't sure what anymore.
Yeah, she was spiritual, but not
Hmm.
whatever the rector was preaching.
Right.
Obviously.
Yeah.
Oh.
I do think my favorite theme in the book was the tension between like the belief you have as like your own individual person who has a relationship with like God and religion and the things you believe, and then your relationship with the person who is supposed to like lead you in your faith. That's something back when I went to church, that I always found interesting, even in myself, is like how much your pastor changes your experience in the church. And that was something I did think was like very well explored in this book, is like how much faith do you put in the leaders versus how much faith do you put in yourself?
Yeah, I mean, if we're being very, very raw here, the pastor that baptized me killed himself.
Oh, wow.
And it was like, it was all very tragic. The man was very depressed and nobody really knew. And it's similar. You don't actually know what's going on, like in a pastor's head. They could be struggling with something, or they could just be batshit crazy in the case of the book character. But like, it's a very real scenario many people experience is like faith in a god and faith in the church are very different things.
Oh yeah. I mean, like from my experience in the Catholic Church, the priests really influenced how you interpreted the Bible, because that is where you're learning most of your Bible study from, is that one day a week on Sunday going to church and having the homily happen, and them basically like giving you their interpretation of the Bible and you taking it as the word of God because that's the godly figure there. Um, that's kind of when I started to move away from the church, is when I noticed that the our priest was getting really political and started endorsing political candidates. And I was like, wait a second, this doesn't seem right. And you can even see that in this book where like the rector was like full on just telling them what to do and like saying shun anyone who does something differently, even if he was right in some cases where it's just like don't spread the plague. But at the same time, he was being super forceful and being super like his sermons were political messages.
Yeah. And while I did not totally love Anna's ending, it just gave me whiplash a little bit. I loved the development with the rector. That
Oh,
I
the best
felt
plot twist.
that was like, it surprised me, but it also felt like built up correctly. And I was so surprised. And like, that is like the moment of the book that got the most like emotion out of
Oh
me.
yeah. I wasn't surprised they got together. I feel like I saw that coming. But
Yeah.
then the revelations he made after they got together, I was like,
Yeah.
oh,
Yeah.
whoa.
Well, because like
Yeah.
it's kind of foreshadowed is that she's trying to pick him back up from the death of his wife and like get him through the grief that she's already experienced. And so you kind of knew that they were going to get together.
Yeah.
But
Right.
let's kind of like delve into Eleanor and Michael Mompillion. Sure. And their characters and their relationship, and then also like how he used his faith to instruct his life.
Like for a lot of the book, I was like, okay, this man is trying to do some good. You know, he has figured out, he's kind of smart. He's figured out how plague is probably spreading and has orchestrated a way to keep more people from falling under harm and is like killing himself to go be with all these people as they die and keeping justice in the town. I'm like, he's doing a lot. So the ending, that's why it was so shocking, is because he is painted as, despite being pretty like bossy, his stuff is well intentioned, and he's painted as him and Eleanor as like the perfect couple because Eleanor is a sweet little gem of a lady who you find out does have like a difficult past, but you you think the best of them. And then wow, did they pull that rug out from under you?
I mean, like, you could tell their relationship was different. Like, it wasn't totally, because, like, when you put on the persona of perfect relationship, I totally think that, like, I'm immediately red flagging, even in real life. Like, in, like, when I see my friends trying to put on perfect relationship stuff and say that they have no problems, I'm like, that's a red flag. You should be working out your differences. Like, that's like, everyone's different. Like, you're not going to be a perfect match for anyone. And they were putting on such a facade. And then you find out that, like, they have never been intimate with each other. And it's because he's punishing her for a prior transgression when she was groomed essentially by a man and convinced to elope with him, but he never elopes with her. So she's just left ruined and with a child who she ends up miscarrying. And, like, that's already an extremely tragic thing to happen and traumatizing.
Well, it's not even that she just miscarries. She causes the miscarriage, which is why he's punishing her, which you're like, I see the reasoning, but you're crazy.
Yeah. It was just so vengeful, and it changes your whole perspective on this experiment that they've done, which again is one thing in the book that I really did enjoy is that, like, after that moment happens, you think back on the book totally differently than when you read it the first time.
When you did, the first, like, major red flag was when her, like, nanny was rolling in the grass with the random village guy, and he reprimands her and not the boy.
And not him. Yep.
And even, like, Anna's kind of like, oh, weird, and, like, calls him out. And that's, like, the first real red flag, but he's kind of, like, giving into, like, plague hysteria and exhaustion. You're like, oh, okay, maybe it was, like, a weird thing. And then you're like, nope, it was on purpose.
Right. And he says some comment. I wish I could remember the exact line, but I can't anymore. But he says something like, I thought I was doing the right thing, and now I realize I just kept all these people here to die. And it's like his whole philosophy of punishment unravels once he stops believing in the thing that he thought wanted him to punish people. And then you're also sitting there thinking, like, is the religion you were supposed to be preaching really about punishing people? Is that what pastors do, is they punish people?
Well, especially puritanical. Like, that was like, if you commit a sin, you're never getting into heaven. That was essentially, you can't be saved. And so, yes, his true punishment was just, like, his idea of saving Eleanor, which is very interesting. And then you see, like, the cracks where he's, like, very derogatory towards women and, like, punishing women for men's mistakes or boys' mistakes. And then you start to think back, because, like, I think he was right in the sense, like, quarantine is the best case in order to stop the spread of plague. And we know that. How could he have known that is kind of a question. And you leave questioning, like, did you do this out of the kindness of your heart, or, like, truly try to do the right thing? Or did you grab at power that was next to you and you wanted that power and validation?
So did either of you read the afterword?
I did.
It's based off of a true, potentially not a lot of historical documents, story of the town of Essen in England. And the Michael Montpellier is loosely based off of William Montpesson, the actual rector of the town, who was not evil. Only, I guess, the good qualities were taken from accounts of him. But, like, I think that made the story so much more interesting as she, like, took this random historical event and said, what would it look like to live through this? And then gave her, like, a crazy, fantastical ending because she suffered so much shit.
Yeah. And then on the topic of Eleanor, I felt that she was the best character. I think my other major complaint with this book is the rest of the town didn't feel very real to me. And I think when I started this book, I actually expected there to be more perspectives in it than just one character. And so that's part of how I feel I just didn't really attach super closely to the book, because all these people are dying. And I was like, I don't really know who any of these people are.
I think you're supposed to feel isolated, and I don't think she truly knew a lot of them is what she learned.
Yeah, it's mob mentality.
In a town that small, they all knew of each other.
Yeah.
And I didn't really feel any of those relationships, even people who she'd known her whole life. I
I
didn't
don't
really
think she
Yeah.
feel.
had those
That
relationships.
that's kind of the critique of it, is that they never talked about anything real because they weren't allowed to talk about themselves, and they weren't allowed to talk about their desires or their life or what they wanted for their life. It was very like, you do your job, you're part of a cog in this machine, and you follow the same way of life.
Right. I mean, I get that. I just guess then the downfall of only having one character's perspective
Yeah.
is what are the stakes.
Yeah.
And
I
so
get
the
it.
only other character that I thought was really interesting was Eleanor. And so she got me through it.
Anise Gowdy.
Yes.
Oh, yeah, I forgot about her. I did like her, obviously, too, you know.
That woman, she said the quote that I read at the beginning. She is a Puritan hellion, like a witch accused of being witchy. Her and her grandma, they are the wise women of the town who are healing people with herbs and stuff, which is just the start of modern medicine. So, like, drown the witches, I guess. I thought Anise was the most interesting character.
She was my favorite character because I am such a nerd when it comes to Salem witch trials and that like history and that time period, because I have truly started to like look into it more, especially with the lens of like, it's not supernatural, it's to put down women who were getting power. And especially during Puritan times, they were getting very scared of the women in those time periods that
Smart
were
women.
the smart women that were truly becoming smarter than the men there, and they were pushing back against the system. And so their way of doing it was labeling them a witch, burning them at the stake, or killing them. And that was kind of like, it was like sanctioned murder. That is what it was.
Well, and the mob mentality of murdering the only two people in the town who can potentially help you ride out this plague.
Yeah.
Is
The irony
crazy.
of it. Yeah. The irony of it was very poignant.
Because Anise essentially is the reason why Anna lives.
Yeah.
And then becomes successful and finds her passion for herbal medicine. I think she's awesome. And I think the plot of The Witch of Anise Gowdy being her stepmom was wild and super fun.
That
It
was
was like
funny.
that plot point and the point where Anna and Eleanor decide to go being minors. I was like, yes.
Yes. Love the minor scene.
That was where I was like, I get the title, Year of Wonders. There's two women in a mine trying to like help a child keep her claim to her home.
Well, because it just shows that the women of the town were doing the most work and trying to keep society functioning while the men drank themselves sick.
Right. The wonders were like doing things you never thought yourself capable of and never thought you'd have the opportunity to do or the desire to do. And I thought that was the point where I like really got the title. I was like, these women are badass.
Right. I did like, so this is one of the only points that I liked in Intermezzo, which I also felt was like quite poignant in this book, is just the fact that like we live by all these made up rules that in the end don't mean anything. And that's basically what these characters learn and then start having a crisis about, is like, we lived in this society that we built around these very specific ideals, and then just like everyone died and none of it mattered. And that's hard, right? That's why so many of them just end up doing so badly, is then there's no real like nexus or organization for their lives and why they're doing what they're doing.
Yeah, she talks about how she never left the town, the village, just because why would she? And it's not until she can't leave that she's like, oh, maybe I should have expanded my horizons a little bit. Yeah. And then finally at the end, she does leave. And it's like a whole wondrous experience. But I thought that was really interesting. It's like so many, we even get caught up in it, you know, like today, like we have our routine and we don't like to sometimes change that or go to new places or meet new people or look at perspectives outside of what we're used to. It's like a very interesting commentary.
Yes. It's especially good. So I have a little sister who for a long time has been like the whimsical lost child. She's back in school now, but she was in college, dropped out of college, wasn't really sure what she wanted to do. And she was in this total crisis mode because she felt like she was like off schedule. And I was like, do you realize that like all of this stuff is made up? Like there are no rules. Like, none of this really matters. Like, you're gonna die one day.
It's something that I'm like literally talking to my counselor about. I'm like, I'm about to turn 30 this year and I like don't have a house or a husband or a car that's really nice or like
Yeah.
any of this. And she's like, but are you happy? And I'm like, yeah. But like no one says you have to do those things. It's just societal
Right.
expectation.
Right.
And fuck society.
Exactly. That's
I mean,
what we
that's
learned
kind of
from
what this book
Anna.
is about. So
I mean, yeah, and that's the crazy part about it is it's written before COVID even happened, and I have to
know.
keep saying it because it's literally I am glad I read it last year and not 2 years ago because I wouldn't have been able to get through it because it would have been too
it
PTSD
makes
filled.
me even more mad that I missed her author event. I need to look up if there's somewhere her talking about that. Like writing this in 001 and then living through 2020, like I want to know like if she would have written it differently or if she's just like sitting there smug like told y'all so. Like
Yeah.
wild.
Also, it made me want to read more plague books, but that's just the historical fiction lover in me.
Yes. Okay, so we've gotten into this a little bit, but Anna and Michael, the whole book, have this sort of weird insinuation-y relationship where she clearly like really idealizes him and he seems like the perfect guy. She even says this, he's basically the total opposite of Sam, which she finds attractive in a lot of ways. Um, and so they obviously have like a very like prim relationship, but there's all these sort of little moments of connection that make us think that something else might be there. And then obviously we know how that devolves in the end. What did you guys think of that whole relationship?
I mean, the red flag should have been that when he thought she was like illiterate, she was uninteresting.
Yeah.
And then as soon as he's like, "Oh, my wife taught you how to read." Oh, okay, we can have sex now.
And he's also like kind of mad that his wife taught her how to read.
Yeah.
Like he's not totally supportive that his wife taught her how to read and
He
doesn't
wants
really
to
like
keep the people out of the knowledge.
dependent
Well,
on him.
he definitely gets very mad at her in situations where she goes outside the grain and outside the norms, like yells at her even.
Yeah. And it's like he also says this comment when he realizes that Eleanor had told Anna the full story of her past, where he was like, he says something like, you guys are closer than was proper, or like, it sounds like you were more closer than was appropriate.
I was like sort of rooting for a little lesbian romance, but then I realized this
Me
was written in
too.
2001.
Same.
So.
I was so looking forward to that, either between her and Eleanor or her and Anise. Yeah.
Yeah, I thought they were going to be
They
gay.
were truly just the best of friends, which is so pure. But if this was written today, they would have totally been secret lesbian lovers.
Yes, they would have.
But I think it was interesting how
Year of Wonders fan fiction, anyone?
Oh my God. I can't. But
when this is already fanfic about a historical event.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, because by the time you get to Michael and her sleeping together, you already are like, there's so many red flags. You shouldn't be doing this. He's broken on the inside. He's using you to get back his sense of morality. Like, stop.
Right.
Like,
and it's also
go on.
Oh, I was just gonna say, we understand her reasons for doing it, and we know that they're kind of like rooted in grief and this like desire to like be loved and also be close to her friends still. But you're like, why is he doing this? Like, he's just spinning out and wants to just like fuck someone. Like, you're just like, no.
Yeah, you get the actual ick. Like, there are little red flags, but the actual ick comes when he is grieving Eleanor and she's like having to like walk him to his room and feed him and like brush his hair and stuff. And you're like, he doesn't deserve this. It's been months. He's given up on his people that you thought he had all this care for. And then he screws Anna because he regrets never screwing his wife. And you're like, oh.
Yeah.
And then he helps her leave, which is crazy too.
Yeah. And he's also like,
he tries to send her someplace he can access.
I was
her.
like, yeah, he helps her leave with the caveat of staying with Eleanor's father so that he can have easy access to her in the future.
Yeah.
Yes.
And he always knows where she is.
And she was smart enough to say no.
When she takes that baby and flees, I was like, oh yeah, girl, you go.
Mhm.
And you totally knew she was knocked up too. So
Yeah, it was obvious because they referenced like, oh, and then he took me again in the morning. I was like, all right, where's the baby?
yeah. She's
Which is
clearly
good
still
because she
young
needed
and
children. Because
She did.
it was
Those,
depressing her losing her kids. I wanted her to have kids.
And like I knew in the end she'd have to end up with like some form of family again.
Yeah.
Probably a child, but was it realistic in any sense? No, but I loved it. I know
I
Casey
love the
didn't.
ending. I love
But she
the
like
ending.
ends up with 2 kids, no man, and gets to like learn all this cool stuff. It's like,
Well, I mean,
okay,
technically she does have a man because she's married to
but
a
not in
doctor.
like a romantic sense.
No.
Yeah, but he leaves her alone.
It's like an old
And
man
lets
who
her
offers
learn
protection
things.
and knowledge. Yeah. And she's like
Yeah.
helping women. And it's like,
Well,
that's
and
cool.
that's okay. Isn't that the crazy part? Is that this book was written in 2001 and it has a more modern interpretation of the Middle East and a very Puritan interpretation of England. Like the negative connotations of England and the positive connotations of the Middle East in 2001.
So,
Yeah. But it's true.
so many things you can pull out of this book.
Yeah. I mean, it's historically accurate. Like
Yes.
when England was in its dark ages, the Middle East was having their like Enlightenment era and we're inventing math. So
And we wouldn't have modern medicine without Arab countries.
No,
Yeah.
they were the first for math. They were the first for science, astronomy, like architecture.
literally.
Yeah.
But like that was crazy to me to being like, oh, so the progressive countries are the Middle East and the regressive country is England. Great.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah.
Shout out Love is Blind Habibi. Everyone watch it. Anyway, I'm assuming we all have like similar favorite side characters. Obviously it's all the heretical women who are the favorites.
Absolutely.
Okay, I don't know. I feel like we've already discussed a lot of this. What do you guys want to talk about?
We didn't really get into the Bradfords, but they were kind of shitty humans.
That was the commentary on rich people. And we've done enough books on the rich people.
Right.
Yeah.
It's also
there was
accurate.
commentary on everything if you pull it apart.
Yeah.
Because that actually also is part of how the plague spread is rich people fleeing. Like that's actually historically like one of the big problems of how it happened.
I mean, think about how it starts. It's shipping rats on boats from Asia comes to England. And it's because of the Silk Road and shipping and trading. Only rich people can afford those things. And then the rich people flee the mass city centers and then spread it throughout the country. Yeah.
Well, but
sad,
I mean, like, if you know anything about the plague, when her son picks up the rat, you're like, ah, shit.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so like, you know, it's coming in through these wealthier people and not their estates and trickling down.
Well, it's also interesting that the plague in that town starts with a thread of fabric.
Mm-hmm. Bolt of fabric.
But yes, the Bradfords were shitty, but also you couldn't like totally blame them because that's just what they were taught to do.
Well, and then it's also all the people who wouldn't let Anna burn the guy's work. They were like, nope, we paid for this. We're taking it. And she's like, well, there's a plague. Maybe he was sick. And they're like, nope, we paid for it. So like greed spread the plague in this town.
Yes.
Yeah.
So many themes.
Yeah, we haven't talked about her dad at all.
Oh my God. I was just thinking about like all the child abuse.
Yeah.
And her stepmom going absolutely ape shit crazy.
Stuff gets really gory there at the end.
Yeah.
Yeah, the stringing up her daughter.
I was like, ooh.
Ugh. It was hard to read.
That's the one point in the book where I was like, oh, I'm feeling that one in my stomach.
Or the people like flogging themselves and like looking for all these other outlets to explore because they're having a crisis of faith. So interesting. So much we could talk about for hours and hours. Everyone should read this for a book club.
Yes. Even I confess, good book club book.
Well, what book would you recommend in place of this book that's more interesting to you, Casey?
That is a great question. I wish I had thought about this beforehand, but I really didn't. Now I'm like, let me hurry and get a book recommendation going. I'm trying to remember even the last time I enjoyed historical fiction, and I think it may have been To Kill a Mockingbird. So,
Jesus.
Wow.
what other books have I read that dealt with plague themes?
I mean, it doesn't have to be a plague book.
Here's one. Not nearly as complex, but The Lost Apothecary takes place in older England and is about women who sell apothecaries tools, but also poison because they're badasses. So
And
I
that's a
recommend that
very
one.
real thing.
Yeah.
I mean, aqua
Yeah.
tofana was a real thing in Sicily, poisoning your husbands because they were beating them.
Yeah.
That was 1500s Sicily.
Yeah.
Okay, I have my recommendation, which is actually another Catherine book. But I'm gonna go with The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue.
Oh, love that book.
Yes, not pure historical fiction, but a lot of historical fiction elements and sort of similar themes of like oppressed women trying to find freedom. And that book hits like a bunch of different time periods and also is very fascinating and sort of magical. And there's like a romance with the devil. So, all the things I enjoy.
I'll
Yeah.
have history if it comes with a side of.
Yeah. Side of romance with the devil.
The magical side of things.
Yeah.
I think I'm going to go with recommending a book I've recommended before in this podcast, but it's Codename Helene. If you like historical fiction, it follows a female spy during World War II, but it also kind of follows her life beforehand as a journalist covering the rise of Hitler and falling in love in France. She's from Australia, and she kind of ends up as a reporter on the rise of Hitler, while also kind of learning about French culture and also her place as a woman and falling in love. And then you get to see her as a spy on the front lines in World War II, trying to piece together her life. And it follows a very interesting tale from there. And it's a true story. It's based on a true story, which I find very fascinating.
Also, like the longest historical fiction ever.
I'm sorry. I enjoy historical fiction. So only take my recommendations if you enjoy historical fiction.
Super long.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I think that's everything. These are just our opinions. We'd love to hear from you guys. What did you think of the Year of Wonders? And hit us up with your opinions. Also, hit us up with other book recommendations because we'd really like to read more books on your behalf at Busy Girls Pod pretty much everywhere.
If you can find a historical fiction Casey likes, we'll bring you on the episode to discuss.
Period.
Exactly. I second that. And rate and review the podcast. 5 stars, preferably, but live your truth.
Or not. Oh my gosh. It's been a fun podcast, guys.
Mm-hmm.
And with that, I'm Catherine.
I'm Caitlin.
And I'm Casey. Thanks for listening. And when you get a chance, take the break with the Busy Girls Book Club.